Okay, so I've read a lot of amazing books this summer, and as I've often done on my channel in the past, I love coming on here and just giving you guys recommendations for books, because as you can see on my bookshelf there behind me, a lot of the books that I have are recommendations that you have given me in your comments down below on my videos. And I wanted to return the favor with you guys by talking about some of the best books that I've read this summer. So with this video, I have 5 specific recommendations of the 5 best books that I've read over the last like 3 or 4 months. And these books kind of range in genre and authors, and they're from authors of different country, and they're all books that really connected with me and really meant something to me, and the books that I personally, out of all the books that I read this summer, would recommend the most to you guys. So if you have any just general recommendations for me, or recommendations based on the books that I loved in this video, leave them in the comment section down below. However, before we actually begin the recommendations, it is really hot in California right now. It is a severe heat wave, so let's fix that. Let's go get cool. I've never been as fascinated with a book's reception as I have been with Jennette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mom Died, and I think that's just because I've never seen a book sell out and continue to be sold out at the current rate in which this book is sold out. Earlier in the year, I think like many others, I saw that title of the book come up in an article. Jennette McCurdy debuts I'm Glad My Mom Died, and just for the sake of the story, by the way, I have read the book, and I know in the book, Jennette McCurdy despises being called Sam Puckett, her character on the hit TV show iCarly, but just for the sake of the timeline, I'm just gonna call her that for now so I can kind of catch you guys up there. But I just want to make it clear I'm not disrespecting Jennette McCurdy at all. The last thing she needs is a random dude on the internet in his bathtub disrespecting her. But I remember seeing that title of the book in an article and going, holy shit, the girl from iCarly, Sam Puckett, wrote a biography and that's the title? I know nothing about her. Who the fuck, like, what is this? This is really interesting. And I know that many others were also gravitated towards that title, as well as being gravitated towards iCarly, because that show was an inspiration for many people in my generation. It's arguably the inspiration for why I'm here right now talking about books on the internet. And I remember seeing an article the day after the book released, and the book was talking about how it's an immediate #1 bestseller, and I was like, that's awesome. I'm really interested. I want to go read it. So I drove to my local bookstore, and I went there and was like, hey, do you have a copy of this biography? And the guy behind the counter kind of laughed, and he's like, nah, man, we're all sold out. Do you want to be put on a wait list? And I was like, sure, I'll be put on a wait list. Like, I'm not in any rush. I was like, how many people are on the wait list? And he's like, 15 to 20. And I was like, what the fuck? This small bookstore has that many people waiting for this book? That's incredible. And immediately, the reception to this book started blooming. It was sold out everywhere. When it first came out on August 10th, I remember checking Amazon and I couldn't buy a physical copy of the book until mid-October. So me wanting to see what the hell the big deal with it was, I went and immediately got the audiobook and the electronic Kindle version of the book, and I listened to the audiobook, which by the way is narrated by Jennette McCurdy. But then the reception for the book kept going, and I just was like, I gotta read this. And then I finished it in 2 days, and I must say, yeah, it's really damn good. I was not expecting for Jennette McCurdy to go into as much detail or to be as subtle as she was with this book. Yes, if you, by the way, don't know anything about this book, it details the abuse that her mom has inflicted upon her over the course of her life, as well as dealing with a lot of her own personal trauma and all the behind the scenes of her being an actor, a writer, starring in iCarly, dealing with substance abuse problems, everything. It was very direct. But there are 2 specific things that I really love that I want to talk about, because I don't want to beat this book to death. This is not a fiction book. This is someone's life. So there's not really much discussion here that I could typically have with a fiction book, but there are 2 things that I really loved here. The first one is that a lot of the abuse that Jennette McCurdy suffers at the hands of her mother is directly there. It's on screen, it's present, you feel it. But there are often times where she lets a lot of things go unsaid. She often will let the reader kind of piece together what is needed to be said as she ends a chapter on a key pivotal moment between the relationship between her and her mother. Or she'll kind of let things go, let them hang in the air, so you as the reader have to piece these together. And I found this to be such a compelling way that she told the events of her life, because I thought it brought the readers in a little bit more, because she could have been very direct, very upfront, and it would have been just as impactful. But removing some elements of the book, letting the audience piece things together, I think was an incredible choice. The second thing that I want to talk about is regarding the events of her life here, is the fact that woven into her life is a tale of generational abuse. And it's not a tale as in a fictional story, but I found myself compelled not primarily by Jennette McCurdy or her mom, but the person that I was most interested in a lot of the times in the story was her grandmother. And her grandmother is not a central key figure in the story, but I would argue she's the most important person in this book outside of Jennette McCurdy's mother, because of course it's titled that, because I viewed a lot of the stuff happening in this book as a series of circumstances. Jennette McCurdy's mother is an awful person. I want to clarify that. But she is not an awful person because she was born awful. Rather, she was raised and groomed by her circumstances. And those circumstances are the same abusive and manipulative behaviors from Jennette McCurdy's mother's mother, so Jennette McCurdy's grandmother, who is a figure in the story who comes in, exhibits the same behavior, and doesn't necessarily get the same level of observation or criticism that I would have hoped, but her grandmother probably wasn't like that just for no reason. There was probably a history of abuse and manipulation, and I thought that these little subtle commentaries about Jennette McCurdy's mom that she makes reflect more on her grandmother than anything else. And watching Jennette McCurdy go through that same turmoil that most likely impacted her mother at the hands of her grandmother, and watching Jennette McCurdy slowly break it, overcome her story, be what she wanted to be, I thought was utterly compelling. I did not expect this at all when I was reading this book. I'm not a reader of biographies. I don't read nonfiction, and I personally did not realize I would be so captivated by a child star for a TV show that I watched when I was younger. But now she's not a fucking child star. She's Jennette McCurdy. She's an incredible voice in writing, and I really am actively looking forward to what she does next. I will check out whatever she does next. I listened to some episodes of her podcast, and she's a really, really great, insightful mind, and I frankly wish that we will get more of her writing soon. And with the massive success of this book, I can only hope that she will write and create more, because she is amazing. I love this book. I don't often read biographies, like I said, but I found myself just absolutely riveted, and I would again highly recommend the audiobook version of this. She kicked ass reading it. It was incredible, absolutely jaw-dropping incredible. And I don't listen to audiobooks, and I was riveted by it. So I think making booktube videos actually ruins the joys of reading big books, and that's because booktube exists on reading as many books as possible so you can talk about a large number of books, and I think that is taking the joy away from diving into these bigger books. And after making booktube videos for about a year now and really realizing the effect that it had on me, I want to set out to try to find and read the biggest book that I can. So I went to a Barnes & Noble near me and I picked up Alexander Dumas's The Count of Monte Cristo, an unabridged version, which comes in at 1,243 pages. And I read this over the course of 3 weeks, and I mean this with absolutely no hyperbole. I think, despite the book's length, that this is the perfect book to get into classics with. And I promise you that this is one of the most exciting, engaging, and approachable books I've ever read, not just in classics, but books as a whole. If you don't know anything about the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, it's a tale as old as time. A guy is falsely in prison, he tries to break out, and he tries to get revenge on those who have done him wrong. And what we're treated by from Dumas is this sprawling, beautiful landscape of a story that gives you so many detailed characters that each have their own specific backstory that then flesh out the world. So as the story unfolds, and as our main character works to get back at those who have wronged him and taken away his life from him, you feel like you are entrenched in this aristocratian French and English and Spanish society, and Italian too, I can't forget that. And you are thrown into this European hierarchy with Dumas's writing that feels like it is a modern style of writing. I did not know a single thing about Dumas's prose or writing style before I really tried to dive in to the Count of Monte Cristo. I thought it was going to be this really difficult, kind of like flowery prose, and what we got is this very, I would say, fast-paced, witty, adventurous, and genuinely exciting piece of literature. And I know that the length of it is still a little overwhelming, and I know that Dumas did write per page count. The more he wrote, the more he was paid. So I will not deny the fact that there is a lot of fluff in this book, stuff that can probably be cut out. And for that, I would heavily recommend an abridged version, one that's probably been severely condensed. But if you are feeling really bold and you're really interested in a pretty well done character study with a very, very fleshed out world, with exciting characters and stuff that has immense payoff and everything is woven together with characters that make sense, with witty dialogue and writing that is equally as humorous as it is touching and insightful, with a story that really never got old. And when 1,242 pages had gone by, I sat there going, fuck, I could do another 1,000 of this. I am just that invested in these characters. I cannot recommend a classic enough. If you are at all interested in getting into classics, do not be scared. I promise you, this book took me over 3 weeks to read, and this was with reading like 100 pages a day at times. It took me a while. And it's going to take you a while too, but don't be intimidated. In this book, in the pages of this really interesting cover, there is a book that you will not regret reading. I think it's one of those books that could act as a gateway into literature that seems really daunting and has a stigma with it. And honestly, after reading Alexander Dumas's The Count of Monte Cristo, I went and immediately bought The Three Musketeers, and I'll be reading that after I read all the books I'm reading right now, because I'm just that excited to see what else he can put out and what else he can write. The Count of Monte Cristo is arguably one of my favorite classics I've ever read, and I can't recommend it enough. So let's switch it up a little bit, and now it's time for some romance. I kind of lied a little bit. The book Naomi by Junichiro Tanizaki really isn't that romantic at all, and if you've never heard of this book before, it is basically about this 28-year-old man named Joji who is so traditionalist. He wants a wife, and he wants like the ideal woman who will complement him within these kind of like Eastern society ideals at the time during this era in Japan. And his solution for this is to find a younger girl, a minor, and basically raise her up to be the ideal perfect wife. And that's where Joji meets Naomi working at a coffee shop at the bar, and immediately the connection is just not there, but Joji forces it, and he constantly tries to make Naomi the perfect bride, the perfect woman, the perfect wife. And this story is all about how that backfires immensely. And I feel like if you're really interested in Japanese literature, but you don't like Haruki Murakami, or not interested in Haruki Murakami, or kind of turned away a little bit by the, I would say, more adamant ideals and interesting beliefs of someone like Yukio Mishima, Junichiro Tanizaki's Naomi is an excellent place to start if you're looking for kind of an insight into Eastern ideals, specifically Japan during this time period and what it means to be like a Japanese wife in a Japanese household, and specifically the time in which Japan is being heavily influenced by Western ideals. This book is absolutely incredible. It was an absolutely compelling read. I loved seeing the juxtaposition between kind of traditionalist ideas and a Western influence on somebody, and specifically over a society that was really kind of trying to reject and accept these ideas at the same time. There seemed to be two different camps present in this story, and I also found this as a wonderful criticism on masculinity, the expectations of men, and the roles that they place on women, and their expectations within a household. It is absolutely amazing how much Tanizaki was able to fit into this small book of like 250 pages. Not only do we get an extremely fleshed out character in immaturity and insecurity in Joji, not only in his physical stature where he's quite small, but also in his lack of connection with people and with women, and how that reflects and kind of projects onto Naomi. And then you get the opposite side of Naomi, a utterly fascinating character that I still fully haven't comprehended on my first read, I'll just be completely honest. She is someone who so abhorrently rejects these Eastern ideals and is so heavily influenced by Western ideology that it leads to a massive confrontation and a massive collision with Joji's expectations in a woman. And we get this really multifaceted exploration of men and women in the society, tying together with this arguably manipulative and abusive relationship. But as the story progresses and we learn more about Naomi and her relationship with the world and with other men, that Naomi is the one with all of the power, and that Joji is just desperate for something. And I don't want to spoil the entire story, but if you are at all interested in getting into Japanese literature and you don't want to read the typical Haruki Murakami book, I would heavily recommend this one. Hello and welcome to the Haruki Murakami Kitchen Cooking Hour, where I talk about one of my favorite books that I read this summer while trying to cut a cucumber. Because if you've ever read a Haruki Murakami book, his characters do a lot of cooking and cleaning, and honestly, it all sounds super appealing. He makes food sound so good. So I thought I'd talk about Haruki Murakami's Kafka on the Shore while trying to cut and peel a cucumber because, why not? Let's make this interesting. Kafka on the Shore is a book that I actually gave up earlier in my life. I tried reading it for the first time when I was in high school. And when I tried reading it in high school, this is not gonna work. At the time when I was in high school, I really couldn't gravitate towards the super magical realism element of the book. I tried my best, I really did, but I found myself kind of turned away by the abstractness of it all. And I'm really glad I did because I actually finished this book a couple days ago, and I'm really glad I did because I finished it a couple days ago, and I can safely say that it might be one of my favorite Haruki Murakami books. I think Murakami is a super enigmatic writer because a lot of his books kind of aren't that good. If I'm being completely honest, he does not really know how to write endings, and his characters are a little flat and one-dimensional, but within all of that, he does have a really good sense of how to create connections and really talk about moments of time that are really, really impactful in a character's life. And there's always this slice of life element in his books that feel really personable and touching. And I think when Haruki Murakami is shining as an author, like he does in Kafka on the Shore, I think these elements are some of the best that I've read. And Kafka on the Shore has many of that. However, I would say if you're interested in reading Haruki Murakami, do not read Kafka on the Shore on the start. I made an entire video about this, that I do not think that this book is accessible at all if you don't know many of his Haruki Murakami isms when it comes to writing. Weird abstract characters, things that don't make any sense, talking cats, wells, overly graphic and kind of, I would say, intrusive sex scenes that really don't have a lot of connection to people or things. Classic music and art and life have a connection to people, and people, because of art, music, and life, have a connection to other people. And all of these elements are in Kafka on the Shore, but done extremely well. And I really do mean extremely well. There is not a missed beat in this book. This is by far, from start to finish, the best complete Haruki Murakami book that I've read. And I've read all of them. I really do mean that. I think one of my favorite elements of this book is the difference in ages between the two characters. The first one, Kafka Tamura, I think is how you say it, is a 15-year-old runaway who is running away from the curse put upon him by his dad. And we don't really know what that curse is. And actually, for the first 20 pages of the book, we really don't know why he's running away. And we get a lot of that youthful ignorance kind of displayed through his character, but mixed with this touching sense of understanding of his place and his role and his connection with people that I found was more mature than a lot of other characters in the story. In contrast, the other perspective that we get is of a 60-year-old man or 60-plus-year-old man named Nakata, who is not able to really retain information, and by all accounts in the book, he is labeled as kind of special needs. And getting to view the story from his perspective, his connection with cats, how he views the world, how he engages with the world, is this really beautiful contrast. And both of these characters go on this wildly spiritual journey that lead them to form a connection between each other as their stories ultimately end up kind of coalescing by the end of the book. And honestly, I found this to be the most moving Haruki Murakami book that I've read yet. I've read a lot, all of his stuff by this point, and honestly, I think this one is the most well done. And I know it's arguably his most popular and his most well received, so that take really isn't something special, but I think if you at all like Haruki Murakami and have not gotten to this book, this should be a must-read. I loved a lot of this. And there's this really great motif in the book about how media has these connections and can build these connections between people that I thought, coming from the mindset of an author who creates media as a career and as a living, had some really great insights that I really, really loved. And just like that, our cucumber is basically all cut. That's a pretty... That cucumber is terrible. What the fuck? Ew. Okay. Well, yeah, that's Kafka on the Shore. Definitely, if you're cutting cucumbers, make sure they're fresh. These are not fresh, and they taste like soap. Well, look who decided to show up. The last book that I want to talk about here today, I actually had a choice. It's one author and I read 2 of their books this year, and I ended up choosing Natsume Soseki's The Gate over his book Kokoro. I chose this one because this one is a really interesting book, and if you've never heard of this one, I don't know how much I want to talk about this book in detail. Basically, the story is about this guy Soseki and his wife Ayone as they live their life. It's basically like the movie Patterson with Adam Driver, where he basically just goes through his life over the course of 7 days, but this book is kind of a lot more somber and reflective and honestly more nihilistic. But what really struck me about this book is Natsume Soseki's ability to convey average day-to-day life and the ability to convey a sense of hopelessness and a sense of acceptance of roles and fate in this story, specifically with our main character Soseki. We don't find out until much later in the story, but apparently Soseki has committed some grave act, some sin in his past that caused him to be exiled from his family, nearly expelled from his university, and shunned during this era in Japan society when that was a really big thing. And we don't know what it is, but we're feeling the repercussions, not only on Soseki, but with his wife and then his younger brother who later comes to stay. And we don't really know what's going on, and the book kind of meanders for a while. I'm going to be completely honest. If you are not into books that really take their time and really just focus on the mundanity of life and how that affects people, you're not going to like this. But for me, someone who absolutely loves that kind of stuff, this book was 100% exactly what I'm looking for. And the book is just ultimate criticism on nihilism and acceptance of roles and realizing that there are things that you just can't escape, and there are holes that you won't dig yourself out of. And it's a fascinating look into, honestly, like a demasculated man who really isn't, but has almost demasculated himself in the society. And I found that to be super compelling, especially when the book doesn't really have a lot of grievances with the characters. Soseki and Ayone have a great relationship. They love and care about each other, and she does her best to support him. This is a story about relationships, our connections with people, what we choose to do and what we choose to be. And honestly, after having tackled similar themes in Kokoro, I think Natsume Soseki hits this nail on the head, and I love Kokoro. I love it a lot, actually, and I think this book is just a step above all of that. And I mean, come on, it wouldn't be a Colors Wonderland video if I didn't recommend at least one NYRB per video. That's at least the toll for coming here. You know how much I love these books, and honestly, again, like I talked about with Tanizaki and Naomi, if you're interested in getting into, I would say, like different, less traditional Japanese literature, I would say definitely check this out. Another recommendation for a movie based on this. If you like kind of like the passing of time, the reflections on life, there's this really great movie on Buddhism called Summer, Spring, Fall, Winter, and Summer. And it's just one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. I adore it from start to finish. And honestly, after reading this book, it just made me want to rewatch that movie. It is an amazing movie, and it's a great complementary piece to this book. So yeah, that's The Gate by Natsume Soseki. And that actually brings us to the end of this video today. Thank you guys for watching. I hope it was fun. I hope you got some good recommendations out of this if you haven't already. I'm sorry if my appearance or my demeanor is kind of a little disheveled or really kind of like lethargic. It is so fucking hot in California right now. We don't have AC, and I'm kind of just a mess of sweat and like grossness, and my motivation is down the fucking drain. So I'm really sorry if my videos, at least this month, maybe deep down appeared like I don't have as much energy as possible. It's just like I'm still kind of sick and it's really hot. It's arguably the worst combination on earth. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you haven't already, go check out my friend Matt's Bookshelf, who makes great booktube content, as well as Drunzo, who also makes great booktube content as well. My friend Matt also has a book you can check out on Amazon, so if you like that, you should definitely go check that out. And if you haven't already, I have a Patreon, so if you feel like supporting the channel, you can there. Just a Discord that we can talk and kind of chat and stuff like that. So yeah, that actually brings us to the end now. All the books will be in the link in the description down below. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you again soon.